tips and tricks of property. We're going to talk about valuations and how you can be blessed, particularly lately. Stay tuned. Stay tuned.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Morning Minutes. Myself, Michael Burgio Mark Novak, episode 1556. Blessed by valuations. Yes. Valuations in this industry is a lot. When you ask the buyers, they're not too adverse on the tips and tricks of that industry, but they hold a pivotal part of the industry. A lot of people always talk about to sales agents about the value, but when it really comes down to leveraging your asset, buying that second, buying that third property, the value, I can change that value instantly on that property. And there can be big fluctuations between valuer's opinion on the same property on the same day, which can have big effects. It can be the difference of buying that second property and not buying anything at all.
And we're not talking about real estate agent appraisals of when an agent comes to your property and tells you where they think it sits. We're talking about the bank valuer, when the bank sends out the official registered valuer to give you the value on your property.
Like, it may seem like a small thing. All right, let's say you bought it for 1.2 and getting a valuation of 125, 1.3. That can have massive effects, and that can be the difference of having enough to buy a second property without having any additional savings. Or the reverse, if it comes in at 1.1 and you need to come up with an extra 100 grand instantly to either purchase that property or be able to re-leverage that property. So it's pretty big, the consequences either way. And we've definitely seen clients leverage it very, very well. Because at the end of the day, it is a human valuing that property, and it is subjective. So there can be fluctuations. And with that fluctuation, there's people where I've seen them get 2, 3, 4, 5 valuers to that property to get opinions, because they know if they can get that little bit more, they can buy another asset without potentially saving for 3 years.
And you know what? You're never going to make your money by saving and putting it in the bank and not buying property. The art of the valuation and the property and the leveraging is huge. And guys, a chat we had off air that I have to talk about is when you do what you've just spoken about, Michael, that leveraging, the property is probably the only thing banks will allow you to use their money for with least amount of rules. If you went to the bank and said, I've got 100,000 and I want to buy Bitcoin, good luck. They're not going to be interested. If you went to the bank and said, I've got 100,000, I want to go and buy shares, can I have 400,000 for shares? Good luck. It's going to be hard. It's with leveraging. Most assets, if you say, I've got 100,000, I want to go and I want 400,000 and I want to buy a business, it's going to be hard. But the easiest way to get a property partner like a bank is property. You've got 100 grand, they give you 400 grand. They say to you, on the 400 we're giving you, you can keep the capital growth. They say, on the 400 we're giving you, you can keep the rent. We just want 5%. Now, when you're getting valuations, it is so critical, because that 100,000 that you've got in the property, as soon as you've got, and you've bought something with 400 of their bank's money, 100 of your money, they've bought something for 500. When that 500 swings to 600 and the bank valued it at 600, now you've got 200 in that property and they've still got 400 in that property. And that's that art of leveraging where you can actually then go to $1 million worth of property. And it's like, oh my God, that happens so quickly. So that little tweak in that valuation just makes such big changes in people's lives.
And the best property valuers are very active with knowing that. And it could be the occasion that there was an auction around the corner, it sold for big money. You wait for that to settle and you go get yours valued. And that's one of the last sales, and you get that valuation of 600, as you said, and you go buy straight away. There's no rule saying you can't buy within 3 months or 9 months, or you've got to wait 2 years. And obviously, as you said, you can't, well, it would take a lot longer for most people to save for that extra 100,000. But by being active, knowing the market, knowing some deals, and don't get me wrong, just as well as there's deals that will inflate the price and get you that higher valuation, there can be deals that can bring it down where owners have to sell quickly and it may not be the best price. But that's where those real active property investors can do really, really well, knowing the system, knowing the timing, and getting those vows done. Because we see swings and roundabouts in the property market in different months of the year, different quarters of the year. There's always some really standout sales which can be leveraged.
And look, today's all about educating people, right? You know, people may not even thought about, you know, how critical a bank valuation can be in the funding of properties and growing and stuff like that. But just to give you some perspective, I was with last night dinner, state manager and one of the best brokers in the country. And I can't tell you how acutely aware bankers were of valuations. You know, it's a massive part of their business. They understand that the income, the profile, the valuations are absolutely critical in the growth of clients and funding and stuff like that. So it's a huge world, guys. You've got to understand it. You've got to you know, appreciate it, respect it. When that valuer comes through as a real estate agent, we make sure we've done all of their homework for them with preparation, with, you know, this sold for that and this sold for that, documented evidence. As an owner, make sure the property is presented as best it can be, because getting a great valuation is just going to unlock so much for you with
Yeah,
leverage.
and I've seen the variance on the same property valuations vary from 850, especially off the plan. There can be a lot of variance when it was bought a couple of years ago, but I've seen it from 850 to 1.1. Same property with the same week valuation swings. And that's the difference of either putting no money in to buy that property or being able to buy two properties. Massive, massive variation. And then what was the other thing I was going to say? Forgot now. But yeah,
Well,
you're right.
also that valuation sticks. Once they a bank writes a loan against a valuation, those valuations stick. So the banks generally, and this is a great thing about residential, for example, and you know, sometimes commercial loans, they need to evaluate you and your property every year. The great thing with residential is once you've had that valuation, that can stick for 30 years, that valuation, and so can the loan.
Yep.
So it's drawing a line in the sand
Yes.
for your funding, and that line's going to hold. So that valuation again, guys, it's super critical. Make sure you're presenting the property well. Agents, make sure you got your comparisons there. Bankers, make sure you got your good your great valuers. And you can. It's interesting. How does a bank choose a bank valuer? They actually have a panel. So they have a panel of normally 2, 3, or 4 companies, and those companies have a bank of valuers themselves. So they're constantly changing people off different panels
And that's what people don't
every week.
understand, because you may get let's say you get your pre-approval with CommBank and you get a valuation of 850, and you want to see if you get a higher valuation. Then you go for a loan through Westpac, they send their valuer at 950. Sometimes it can be frustrating that you get the valuation from the bank that doesn't give you the best terms that you want. And you're like, well, what do I do here? I get the higher price and have to put less money in, but pay a higher interest rate, or go to the bank with maybe the lower interest, but I got to put in more cash. So there's a little bit of that game and flexibility. But it's also, like, we look at the Northern Beaches market, it'd almost be safe to say anyone who bought pre-2020 would have enough capital growth to buy that second or third property without putting in anything. It would be very, very easy. And I don't know if buyers get worried about it or they don't know, but they may think, well, once if my valuation is lower, does the bank take my property? Do they make me put the cash in? We're quite fortunate they don't do that. I believe probably by law they could. If the valuation comes in lower than what you bought and you got to have that ratio, they could ask for a top up. But it's a lot of the time it's either leave it as is, or if there's enough equity to buy again. So a lot of time there's no real harm in trying to get multiple valuations to see if you can get a number that allows you to take out cash to renovate your property or buy a second or third property.
Well, look at that. Look at these. We sold these warehouses a year and a half ago, $1 million, 900,000 a pop. They are getting valuations now. They are getting valuations now of 115. Now they are getting rented for 52,000 a year. Why am I telling everyone this? Here you go. If you had the equity, and you just, it's literally like moving paper around a table. If you have the equity and you get the right valuation, which just happened with these warehouses, we've got 85 of them. And people are all getting the valuations now. All the valuers are going, yep, fine. They're handshaking 115. After 1 year of owning it, another year, an additional year, it would not, after strata, water, council, depreciation, rent comes in, it's not going to cost $1 out of those people that have bought's pocket. I ran the maths yesterday and I was really surprised. And the valuations unlocked the equity inside of those properties. So together with their deposit and together with the new valuation, there was enough equity in those deals to stand alone. Now, that was so dependent on the valuation. It's not funny.
Yeah. It's massive. Like, now they can basically get a second property with the one deposit because of the valuation. And if that valuer came in at the it's just a massive game. Everyone's always talking about agents' opinion value. This agent said this agent said that. But that's not what really counts, especially if you want to leverage the market.
Nothing came out of the client's pockets. There was no hard savings. It was just because they got a good valuation on their home, because they got a good valuation on their purchase. They bought well. Because the property rents itself gets good rent. They're not having to top up anything every month, every week.
One deposit, two properties. How to turn
valuation.
One deposit into
valuation.
That's it.
All right. The power of the valuation and what we said this morning, blessed by valuation. Do not underestimate it. Understand it. Always feel free to call us and ask us. Doesn't matter where you are, and say, hey, guys, thinking this. Always happy to help.
Beautiful. Thank you, Mark.
Thanks, Mr. Bird. Cheers, guys.